Welcome to Body Bags, presented by Kokomo Lantern. My name is Jeremy Geiger. I'm one of the co-owners of City of First Cremation. That's where we're at today, having this broadcast brought to you. Today's topic, I want to talk about removals and some of my experiences with removals. Removals can take place in a variety of locations. Some of these places are in facilities, such as hospitals, nursing homes, or hospice facilities. Some of our hospices have actual locations where there may be 8 to 10 beds. They're very short-term stays for the families to let their loved one die in a more comfortable environment outside of their home. Nursing homes, we've probably been to a nursing home, so some of them have private rooms, some of them have companion rooms where they may have a roommate. I've never been to a nursing home that has a cooler or a morgue, so we're always making those transfers from the bedside in the room and then going to our vehicle. Hospitals can be a little bit different. Most of the hospitals that we encounter have morgues where they have refrigeration till we can get there and get the deceased. I prefer to make a removal out of the morgue versus off of the hospital floor, just because I don't want to give false hope that you're not going to make it out of that hospital room. I don't know if I'm the first funeral home that you've seen on your visit, or if I'm the third, fourth, or fifth funeral home you've seen on your stay there at the hospital. So I think it's just more respectful for those that are there in the hospital to maybe not see me on the floor. I also understand as a family that you may not want them to go to a cold, dark room like the cooler or the morgue. But you've got to remember those that are there in that environment as well, that they may not want to be discouraged. That morgue isn't dark, it's cool, the refrigeration is cold. But I think you have to kind of keep those negative mindsets to bay. Your loved one, that it's just a shell that we're left with. Their spirit's gone, they're not with us, and those that are left to handle the shell, they are trying to do it in the most respectful, dignified manner. It's not something that maybe you've heard on the news or you've heard the horror story. It's not like that in the industry. At least I haven't been experiencing any of that. So on the hospital floor, we'd go right to the bed. If we're talking about going to the morgue at the hospital, 9 times out of 10, no matter what, we're going to that receiving loading dock to make the removal. Sometimes families there, sometimes they're not. Security's going to let us in. So that kind of covers the facility side of it. You'll have some paperwork, and then you can get in and get out. It's usually pretty quick of a removal, even if the family's there. The other type of removal that we typically get to encounter is an at-home removal. Those can be really unique to us because we're not familiar with the environment that we're going to. We're always concerned of the weight of the person because we may have to carry them from their bedroom or where they were found, and we can't get our cot quite in there. Some houses have some really crazy hallways and turns that our cot just doesn't quite make the turn or the corner on, so we're looking at carrying those things. Other things that we typically would see, and it's always funny as a funeral director going on a removal, we get the address. We've talked about what that death call procedure is for, so we know what the address is. Sometimes we're even looking at or asking what the color of the house is, because if it's dark, it's tough to see those house numbers, especially if they're not on the mailbox where they're illuminated. So what I find funny is when we go on a house call, I'm usually pretty good on picking out which house it is, and it's nothing against you family members or you community members. It's the house with the most cars in it. Because that death is not just important and impacted you, it's impacted several people around you. It could be the children of the deceased. It could be the grandchildren. It could be neighbors and friends that are coming to support them. They may have known that this person's been sick for a long period of time and they've lost that battle. Sometimes when it's on the tragic side of things, they're just looking to come over and lend a hand to help get things cleaned up. But there's usually lots of cars there. The other thing that cracks me up when I'm going to these residences to make the removal is nobody's ever thought that, oh boy, they've called the funeral home, we know they're coming, they're going to show up in the removal vehicle and they're going to have a cot. Let's make room for them. They absolutely don't, and it's so funny. The driveway's full. The sidewalk up to the house is usually blocked. They're not problems of mine. It doesn't bother me. It's just always funny to see that, oh, we need the funeral home because it's important. We have this need, but don't worry about how they're going to get in there. There are absolutely lots of families, though, that are mindful of that. The winter time is usually those times that I see those families that are mindful, and I think they've maybe experienced the ambulance coming several times to the house, so they're making sure that the walkway is shoveled, that the deceased or the patient is in an easy area for EMTs to get to them, or last responders, which would be removal technicians, coroners, funeral directors, to come to the house to make that removal. Other things that I see when we get to the house, I don't come in and I'm not looking at your possessions. I come to your house and I kind of look around to see, do you live like I do? Am I normal, is my thought. Like, what kind of things do you collect? Like, do we share the same interests and hobbies? I never judge or make assumptions on a person's house if it's not upkept, or if there's a lot of people visiting. Like, I keep a pretty simple house. My house is pretty clean most of the time, but I know families are going through a lot at that time, and that's why I don't have that judgment. I know that you've been up for a couple of days and you may have not showered. You may have not had an opportunity to change your clothes. The trash is overflowing. It doesn't matter. You're over here spending the last days and hours with your loved one to try to make sure you're comforting them, making sure you're coming to peace with their loss. So, it's interesting, and when I'm in there looking, I may be picking up on some clues that are going to help me on the arrangement conference. Hey, I seen that you guys had a picture from the Indy 500. Was that something that you may attended every year? Oh wow, you got married at the Indy 500? Wow, that's really cool. Those things are really neat to me, and it helps lead to more connecting conversations with that family. So those are things that I kind of look for when I come to the house. Another thing that I think is interesting on removals that I wish maybe some of our hospice facilities would be bigger advocates for is where we're going to put this person or patient at the house. I know that it's not always the best idea to put them in the back room or up on the second floor. I get that if the bedrooms are all upstairs and there's no other choice, they're going upstairs. That's fine, I understand. But I know that they do try to keep them in an open room that would be very accessible for the funeral homes or EMTs to come to the house. But it's interesting to see those families that may say, no, they have to go to their bedroom. That's where it's important for them to be and spend their last days and hours. So it just makes it a bigger challenge for the funeral homes. Some of these challenges, like I mentioned, would be the steps or carrying the deceased. We've got different ways that we can carry the deceased. We have what are called body movers. They are a heavy-duty tarp with handles. They run the length of the body. It's not a body bag at all. It's just a big industrial sheet with handles that help us get the person to the cot and get them closer. A lot of times I don't use the carrier. I typically will just pull the sheets around you, including the fitted sheet, and then I'm going to pick you up and carry you to the cot. The other last case scenario that I really don't like to do, it's truly a last resort, and these last resorts only come into place due to the size of the body and or steps or how long you've been down. If you've been down for a period of time and we're dealing with some decomposition or odors, I'm gonna place you in a body bag, so then I can either control that odor, not worry about getting any fluids or decomposition on my clothing or shoes. The other thing that I may do with the body bag is if you're extremely large, I may be able to gently, not drop you, but slide you off of your recliner, off of your bed, gently onto the floor, so then I can maybe slide you out of that room and onto the removal cot. I have had to put a person in a body bag and work them down the steps because the steps were a spiral staircase. There was no way to kind of work the cot up those steps and back down. So putting them in that bag and kind of slowly working them down that staircase was our only option. So those are some of the unique removal experiences that we may overcome at the house. Another thing that is kind of interesting are pets. I see pets a lot of times, whether they're cats or dogs or birds. They know, they can sense the loss. They're mourning with you. They're typically not aggressive when they see or meet us. They may be a little skittish or standoffish because we are unfamiliar to them, but they definitely can sense that we're there to help. Once we get them onto the cot, whether we're at the hospital, nursing home, or at the house, we do give families an opportunity to say their final goodbyes before we cover them up completely and take them to the removal vehicle. For instance, when I'm dealing with somebody in a wheelchair or a small child, I'm probably going to lower that cot down to their level. It's not fair to them to try to not see that person. If they're in a wheelchair, a lot of times I see them just try to reach for the hand and pat it, and I'm like, no, hold on, give me a second, I'll lower it for you. And to see the joy that they're acknowledged and appreciative for the opportunity to say their final goodbye is super huge to me. For instance, I had that instance today where a young man was with his mother. He lost his grandma, and his mom went to pick him up to let him kiss grandma on the cheek, and I said, no, I'll lower it down for him. And he got to stand there like a big boy and give grandma a kiss on the forehead. It was pretty touching for his mom and I could tell that the kid was pretty proud that he was independent to be able to do that for his grandma. And I know that it's going to be a big impact for him as he grows up, and a memory that he'll continue to have. So those are kind of unique removal experiences. This is going to be a shorter episode just because removals, they're not overly complicated. It's all about gathering the proper information to prepare yourself to go to that location for the deceased. So those kind of cover those facilities. I'm going to share with you a pretty unique removal experience for me. I know I just kind of described the facility side and the residential side of a removal. I'm going to kind of go into a pretty unique experience here in Kokomo and Howard County. We have a location southeast of town. It's called the Veterans Healing Ground. It's a campground for our Vietnam veterans. They have a couple of events out there where they get to be with their other brothers in arms and talk about some of their experiences in the service. And it was around Memorial Day weekend, and I got a death call from the owner at the funeral home, and it was about 12:30 at night, and he said, "Hey, I have a gentleman who passed away out at the healing grounds or healing fields. Do you know where that is?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Okay, well, here's the name. You and the removal tech, the part-time guy, meet at the funeral home and head out there. No coroner, the gentleman's on hospice." I said, "Okay." I said, "I mean, I've driven by and I've never been in. Is this like a normal campground where they have like camping spaces? Like, what's the space number?" And he said, "Oh, there is no space number. It's just going to be the camper out there with the lights on." And I thought, really? With the lights on? I mean, I've been by that place during the day, during the night, during these times of celebration. There's a lot of people, lots and lots of people. And I don't recall ever driving by in the evening prior to this that all the campers had their lights off or all the fires were extinguished out there. There always seemed to be some type of activity going on during their celebrations at all hours of the day. So got in the van, my part-timer's with me, and I'm talking with him, and I said, "Hey, did he happen to share anything with you about what we were doing or where we were exactly going?" And he opened up his phone. He says, "Yeah, it's Bob Smith. We're going to the healing fields." Man, that's exactly what mine said. I was really hoping he gave you more information. I asked and he told me with the camper with the light on. And the gentleman said, "Well, that's odd. There's probably going to be a lot of lights on, Jeremy, even though it's 12:30 at night." I said, "Yeah, I know. I'm really hoping we're going to get lucky here." So we get out there, and lo and behold, pull in. The first dozen or so campers, those lights were off, and I was thinking, holy cow, did my boss just somehow call out here and tell everybody to turn their light off except the person that needs us? And we make a turn, and we start heading down a lane, and it's like the Las Vegas Strip. Everybody's got their lights on. We got colored LEDs. I mean, I'm confused. And I see some people kind of in and out of one camper. They seemed kind of distraught. So I thought, hey, that's probably us. So I pull up, and my part-timer goes, "Are you sure this is where we're supposed to be?" And I said, "I have no idea. I'm just getting out and going to ask him." He goes, "I'm not getting out of the car. I'm staying here. I kind of feel uncomfortable. I think maybe I should have brought my handgun with me just to make me feel safer." It's a bunch of veterans. What's going to happen out here? Nothing. These guys, they're not going to hurt us. So I go up to the camper, and I said, "Hey, how can we help you?" I said, "Well, I'm looking for Bob Smith. He passed away out here. Like, are you guys camping out here? Do you know Bob? Or is he in your camper?" And they're like, "No, we're from Southern Indiana. We just served in the military with some of these guys, and we always come up here for Memorial Day." I was afraid you were going to tell me that. All right, thank you. So I get back in the car, and my part-time guy, he says, well, no luck, huh? I said, no, they don't even know who Bob Smith is. And he said, oh boy. He says, I think we just need to keep driving and maybe we get flagged down or we see something. I said, yeah, that's probably a good idea. And I start driving, I go down, finish, and I start coming back, and I'm getting discouraged because I'm not seeing anything. I call my boss, and I'm like, hey, like, do you have a nurse that you can call? Like, dude, there's hundreds of people out here. This is going to take forever to try to find somebody, and we're going to end up upsetting somebody. The part-time guy's even anxious about being out here. He's upset he didn't bring his handgun because he thinks we're going to make somebody mad in the middle of the night. No, it's fine. You guys won't have any problems. And I kind of felt comfortable. And no sooner than I say, all right, I appreciate it. So we turned the corner. I said, oh, I think I found it. I seen a nurse coming out of a camper. She had on her hospital scrubs. I thought, what are my chances here? I've not seen a single person in hospital scrubs out here. They're all in jeans, shorts. And I pull up, and there's no name of the funeral home or anything on the side of the vehicle or on the back. So I felt pretty good just pulling up and kind of talking to them. They didn't know who I was. And I said, hi, you guys happen to know where Bob Smith is? And the one guy sitting at the campfire drinking a beer, he goes, yeah, he's dead inside the camper. I don't think he's got anything for you. What do you want? And I said, well, that's good. I think Bob does need to see me. I'm actually from the funeral home, and I've got my part-time helper. And I said, oh, we were waiting for the funeral home. We were curious how you guys were going to find it. How hard was it? And I said, it was pretty interesting. The people at the front, they don't know who Bob Smith either is because they're from Southern Indiana. They've got a friend up here. I said, I was getting a little anxious because there's no lot numbers. I thought for sure I would never find you. So it went off really well. Finally, once we got comfortable with everybody, I said, well, where exactly is Bob? And Bob was in his camper, had 2 slide outs, and they opened the door, and I then realized on my first camper removal that the removal cot does not fit in there. 1, the doorway was not big enough, and 2, the depth was not big enough to get in or make the turn. Oh, I said, hey, we gotta leave the cot out here. So then the next thought is great, nobody ever asked what Bob Smith's weight is. Please let Bob be a tiny person because it was not that big of an area to try to work in to get Bob. We finally worked back to the bedroom where he was, and Bob was about 90 pounds. He'd been fighting cancer. He had on his army hat. He had on his Veterans Memorial Healing Fields shirt, his sweatpants. And we got to carry Bob out of the camper to the removal cot, which was outside. And we gently placed his body on there and covered him up. His daughter and brother were there. They were very grateful and appreciative of how courteous and gentle we were with their loved one, and they had a couple of jokes for us that was pretty funny, and then it ultimately led to so how many removals have you ever made out here? I said this was a first. Jeff, he'd been on one once before. He was my part-time guy. Then it was hit with, how about out of a camper? So that was a first for me, and it was a first for him as well. So pretty unique experience. They also shared that's where he wanted to die. So this gentleman, Bob, had been spending the last 6 months living in his camper, preparing for his final death. He was on hospice. The nurse came out there and visited with him every day to monitor his condition and to report that back to the doctor. So what a fitting way for that gentleman to go, not only on Memorial Weekend, but with his other brothers in arms, surrounded by those that had the same passions and feelings for our country that he did. It was a pretty cool experience. I've been able to talk to some other funeral directors. They've had, I know of one that had a death that was in a camper. They were driving back from Florida and they died, and they just left him in the camper and showed up at the funeral home and said, "Hey, Grandma's dead in the back. Not sure where she passed. We just kept going. Can you get her out?" And they did. They carried her out and called the coroner and all that stuff. But I've not heard of too many people having to deal with a death at a camper and getting them out of the camper and back to the funeral home. So that does conclude my services here at City of First Cremation and Funeral Services. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for listening and watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you've got any comments, questions, please leave them below. I will go back and look at those and take some time to answer each one of those questions or comments. But this does conclude our services today. Thank you for being here. Bye.